Hello everyone, this is Dr. Al Galban, and this is part 3 of our overview of phonetics and phonology. Last time we talked about speech signal and how acoustic phonetics helps us figure out the properties of a speech signal and translating or converting the speech signal properties into visual representation called spectrogram. Here, let me continue my discussion of this part. And here is, a number of spectrograms for American English vowels. And let's see, for example, E. This is F1, which, as I said before, F1 corresponds to whether the mouth is open or closed. And this F2, which refers to whether we say the sound with the front of the tongue, center of the tongue, or back of the tongue. Okay? In E, there is a gap between the F1 and F2, which means that F1 is low in frequency and F2 is high in frequency. The same applies to E, but a little bit, our mouth is a little bit open in the pronunciation of E. In A, it's more open. That's why the gap is not that great. In A, which is an open vowel, the vocal, the formants, which are peaks of energy and resonances, F1 and F2 are close to each other, as you see, to some extent, because we say A with our mouth open, but F2 is high because A is a front vowel. A is a back vowel, and we say it with our mouth open. That's why F1 F high, but F2 is low because it's a back vowel. The same applies to O and U and U, but here we find that there is some sort of gap between difference between the frequencies of F1 and F2 with regard to these last vowels, because both are closed vowel. We say them with our mouth closed. Okay. So we as human beings and as receivers of any signals, we identify all these things. We perceive F1, we perceive F0 or fundamental frequency, as I showed you in the previous lecture. We perceive duration, we perceive amplitude, which is intensity. We perceive whether the sound, as we saw before, whether the sound is fricative, stop consonant, vowel, consonant, whatsoever. So we perceive all these things. We also perceive whether the speaker is a male or a female, a young person or an old person, through his speech. So the speech signal tells us a lot of things about person's personal background, geographical background, occupational background, educational background, gender background, and all these things. So it's an incredible thing we do all the time, that we identify all these things at once. And thanks to an interaction that's taking place between two kinds of processing: bottom-up processing, which is by receiving the sensory information that we hear, we see, we touch, etc., and also by top-down processing, things that we store in our mind from our background knowledge and experiences and previous models and so on, that that are there, that represent our memory and our stock. If there is a match between these two components or these two kinds of processing, then we understand and we get the meaning of the speech signal or anything that we receive through our senses. We ask ourselves, what am I hearing? Okay, and this is the bottom up, and the top down, is that something I have heard before? If I have heard before, if it is yes, I understand this easily. If it is not, I cannot. And this happens when we listen to non-native or we listen to foreign languages because we do not have enough background, or we listen to them or we hear them for the first time. We don't have background knowledge, we don't have mental models for them, and they seem to us just like mere noises, blah blah blah, and that's it. Unless there is this incredible and amazing matching between and mix between bottom-up processing and top-down processing, we cannot understand any external stimulus, including speech signals. And speech signals, when we segment them, cut them into pieces, we can have, for example, in English speech, there are British English, there are 20 vowels, and in American English this number is not the same, it becomes fewer. And when we talk about British English, it's very inaccurate because there are many British Englishes, many accents. It's a wide spectrum of accents and dialects. The same applies to American English, but we teach you or we refer to the standard forms in the two models. Also, we have consonants, vowels, and consonants. And when we see this, we look at the different place of articulation, starting from the lips up to the glottis, and every area is responsible for the pronunciation of a number of sounds. Sometimes, as here in pharyngeal sounds, in English there are no pharyngeal sounds. In Arabic there are. We have ayn and we have ha. In English, this area is not active. Uvula also. There are no uvular, strictly speaking, uvular English sounds, as we know. However, we have glottal sounds in English, which are, like Hamza in Arabic. We have glottal in which is a variant of ta in some English accents and dialects, like Cockney, where ta is replaced by a glottal stop as in wa'a and ba. Okay. Let's move to something which is higher than segmentals. In phonology, we have two kinds of areas of concern or study in phonology. We have segmentals and suprasegmentals. Segmentals refer to segments, how speech is divided into small segments, small units, vowels, consonants. And in suprasegmentals, we move beyond this to go to speech, to consonant sequences, to syllables, to stress, to assimilation, to elision, to intonation, to rhythm, and all these units of aspects of connected speech. And stress, here we have two words, pronunciation and important pronunciation. Stress falls on the fourth and on the fourth syllable. Important, it's on the second. And in pronunciation, here we have also a secondary kind, what we call secondary stress. We have primary stress falling on A, and secondary stress falling on pro, because this is a lengthy word. But first, what is stress? In order to talk about stress, we have to take into consideration how it sounds from two perspectives. The first perspective is that of the listener, and the second, that of the speaker. To the listener, stress has to do with identifying or receiving sounds or syllables which are stronger, louder, and more, and longer than the rest of the surrounding syllables. So for listeners, these are the elements which help listeners identify these cues of stress. Also, stress is associated with the pitch change from low pitch to higher pitch and vice versa. To the listener, stress has to do with exerting more muscular energy in order to produce a syllable that is longer, louder, and stronger than the rest of its surrounding or neighboring sounds or neighboring syllables. Okay. Stress, the word stress itself is not accurate in acoustic phonetics, because it's something, it is what we hear, but acoustically or physically it's not that, because we acoustically we identify stress by a number of correlates. Number one, the frequency of the vowel in the syllable. Number two, the duration of the overall syllable, and the number three, the pitch change, whether there is a change in the pitch or not. Okay. The three correlates make what we can say generally stress. Okay, when we talk about stress, we talk about two kinds of words: content words and function words. Content words include verbs, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, and function words which have grammatical functions and they do not have meaning in themselves. Then we move to another important thing, which is I call it the golden rule, which has to do with how to stress. What is the general rule that allow us or help us or guide us to place stress in the English words. This rule says that stress the syllable which contains a long vowel or a diphthong or ends with more than one consonant. This rule is not absolute. It's a general one. There are exceptions, but anyhow, it can help us as a guideline in this important affair. Okay. Let's go to stress and morpheme. And first, morphemes are meaning units, and they are the smallest meaning units. And there are two kinds of morphemes, two types: free and pound frame. They can stand alone, and pound they are attached to other morphemes. And free morphemes are lexical, such as teach and elephant. Here the stress works. And function morphemes, which have to do with function words, they are usually unstressed except in certain contexts. Derivation morphemes are morphemes that we use in order to create new words, and inflection morphemes are morphemes which help us assign the tense and the plural form in the English words. Let's go to how stress correlates to suffixes. We generally suffixes do not carry stress. However, we have some suffixes which themselves carry stress, such as EEER, ESES, QUEI, QUE, and ETTE, and so on. Let's move to another area. How about stress marking in compound nouns? And we have a number of rules. If you have a compound noun made up of two nouns, we stress the first one: armchair and ice cream. Adjectives, ed compounds, we put stress on the first part, which is attached to ed. For example, kind-hearted and green-eyed and narrow-minded, etc. The part that where we have ed, noun compounds, we stress the noun. We say first class, second floor. And number 4, we have adverb functioning compounds. And stress here the rule says that stress the second word, so it's west and upstairs. Number 5, adverb verb compounds, stress the verb underscore, applaud, and overcome. Okay. Number 6, when you have more number compounds, here you put the stress on the number. Adjective verbs and nouns. You put stress on nouns, and phrasal verbs put stress on the particles, as you see: give up, come along, put on, and turn off. And then we move to another area of aspects of connected speech, which is rhythm. And rhythm has to do with anything that is taking place at a regular pace. This has to do with everything else, by the way. And in speech, the succession of stresses and unstresses is what we call rhythm. And rhythm is, we have units, rhythm units or foot. And it's signaled by this small vertical line here, and which each rhythm unit must include one and only one stressed syllable plus possibly a number of unstressed syllables. Let's examine the following. For example, Gina was surprised to find that it was not raining in London. Here's the number of stresses is 5. Okay, G and prized and fine and rain and London. 5 stresses and 5 rhythm units or 5 feet. Okay. So every rhythm unit starts with a stressed syllable, as you see, plus any number of unstresses, as you see in this particular utterance. And regardless of the number of stresses, all the rhythm units or feet must be said within the same amount of time. This is how we beat the rhythm of the English language, because English language is a stress time syllable, a stress time rhythm. What we count on is the number of stresses, not the number of unstresses at all. On the other hand, we have other languages which are which follow the syllable timed rhythm, where the number of syllables in a sentence or an utterance determines how much time is given to its pronunciation. So if a sentence includes many syllables, this means that we must give it extra time during its pronunciation. Let's move to another thing here also. Let's have a couple of sentences or utterances. The Labour Party represents the left. Here we have 4 stresses: Labour, then, and left. The second, the Conservative Party represents the right. Okay, 4 stresses and 8 unstresses. Here we must beat the rhythm within the same amount of time, and because we have the same number of stresses. The Labour Party represents the left. The Conservative Party represents the right. Okay, again, the Labour Party represents the left. 4 stresses, 4 pegs, 4 pen. Okay, and the Conservative Party represents the right. 4 banks also, because you have 4. So we don't care about the number of unstresses. Okay, let's move to another area. Here, another example. The same story. Tom had to ask several people the way. How many? 5. Tom had to ask several people the way. Tom had to ask several people the way. Tom had to ask several people the way. 5 pinks, and because we have 5 stresses. This is how we beat the rhythm in English. And why? Because if we give if the unstresses are given or were given the same amount of time and same amount of energy, this would give both the speaker and the listener a very hard time, while speaking, and listening, and it will take so much time, and the rhythm and the music of the language will be destroyed. So here the speaker is focusing on some parts and on some syllables which are important to meaning, because stresses has to do with meaning elements, and unstresses are not important. Sometimes they are dropped altogether. Okay, and this is how we beat the English rhythm. So this means that we have to do two important things at the same time: to expand and stretch out the stressed syllables, and compress and squeeze on stressed syllables. So between stretching and compressing, stretching and compressing lies the rhythm of the English language. Okay. We have here a very important exercise. We have the man Bodakar, the man Bodakar, okay, or Badakar. Here, three important elements: man and Bad and Kar. Man. So whatever is added to these three elements, okay, doesn't add extra time to the pronunciation. So let's speed the rhythm here. The man bought a car. The man had bought a car. The man had bought a car. The young man had bought a car. Okay, this please play. It's a very nice exercise. Let's move to another area. Yes, read across here. Jack living here. If you add other words, no, it doesn't change the time limit or the timing. Okay, Jack is living here. Jack is living here. Jack living here. Drove Canada morning. He drove to Canada in the morning. Italy, South Europe. Italy in the south of Europe. Jane waiting past. Jane is waiting for the bus. Okay, and so on. Please play this game. Very nice one. And move to another aspect of connected speech, and this is assimilation. And assimilation has to do, as the term suggests, with how neighboring sounds behave. They affect each other and they become more like one another. And this is what we call, or what we mean by assimilation. We have two types of assimilation. One is regressive, anticipatory assimilation, and the second is progressive. In regressive sound, a sound is influenced by another sound following it. Let's look at 10 minutes. 10 minutes, na is followed by ma. Ma affects na, and na assimilates to ma. So we have 10 minutes. The same applies to go boy. Why? Because in the first example, na and ma are sister sounds, and da and ba are sister sounds. They are plosive voiced consonants. Plosive voiced consonants. Okay? So the assimilated sounds must be similar inherently, and they turn from just being similar to be complete similarity, to full identification, to be the same identity. Progressive assimilation, a sound is influenced by another sound preceding it. Here we have progressive. Consonant number 1 affects consonant number 2. Okay? Here in the previous one, consonant number 2 affects consonant number 1. So register hits. Okay, here is S plural or the S of present simple tense in the third singular. With a third singular person. Here S here is pronounced as sa because of ta, and is pronounced as za because of ma. Ma is voiced and makes sa voiced also, and ta is voiceless and makes s sa voiceless as well. Okay. Let's turn to the most common. The most common forms of assimilation can be summarized as follows. The alveolar not change into bilabials respectively. So we have act peacefully, good morning, 7 men, sah becomes shah as in this year, zah becomes yah as so zah becomes jah as in where's yours, and dah becomes jah as in education. Okay. Okay. By this, I come to the end of this lecture, and see you next time. Thank you.